On the 24th of July 1991, 21-month-old Ben Needham disappeared on the Greek island of Kos. To this day, Ben has never been found, neither alive nor deceased, and there has been much speculation, as well as conspiracy, as to what happened to him. After 33 years, will his family ever find out the truth about his disappearance? Can you help? Were you on the island at the time? Can you resolve this once and for all? Hey there, little berries and newberries, Airy Berry here. Welcome if you are new, welcome back if you are not. Before exploring the case of Ben Needham, I wish to thank the subscribers, the little berries, and the channel members, the newberries. If you want to become a member of Airy Berry True Crime, please click the join button below, or the link above, or the link in the description. It costs £2.99 a month, and for that you receive early access to videos and member-only content. If you would still like the perks, don't wish to join YouTube, but would like to support me, I launched a Patreon a few weeks ago, and the link to that is in the description or above right now. If you don't wish to do either of these things, just watching helps. That is brilliant, as well as clicking the like button if you do like it, leaving me a comment if you'd like to say something. Subscribing is also free, so I'd appreciate it if you could please. I wish to stress that this case involves the disappearance of a small child and may be upsetting for some people. Please proceed with caution if a story involving a child going missing is triggering for you. There is no disrespect intended to anyone involved in the case, and what I'm about to report is what I have researched online. Information discussed in this video is in the public domain, and corrections are welcome with sources cited. Ben Needham was born to his mother Kerry and father Simon on the 29th of October 1989 in Lincolnshire, UK. Because Kerry and Simon weren't married, Ben took his mother's surname of Needham. Kerry had two younger brothers, Danny and Stephen. In the year 1990, Kerry's parents, Christine and Eddie Needham, went on their first holiday abroad together to the Greek island of Kos. They fell in love with the island, especially Christine, and she was so heartbroken when they flew back to the UK. She didn't want to leave, she wanted to move there. So the family decided that they were going to pack up everything in the UK, cash in their life savings, and move to Kos. So they left their home in Sheffield in Yorkshire, and they moved with Stephen and Danny to Kos, living in a caravan in an olive grove. At the time, Stephen was 17 and Danny was 11. They found a place in Heracles, and it was just so beautiful. There were fruit trees and herbs growing. They felt that they could live really simply there and just enjoy the outdoor life. Kerry and Simon had their own life in Sheffield. They had Ben, but they actually did decide to move out to Kos to join Christine and Eddie. Shortly after arriving, Kerry got a job at the Palm Beach Hotel, and at this point, Ben was around 15 months old. On the 22nd of July in 1991, after Kerry, Simon and Ben had been on the island for about 6 months, Simon returned to Sheffield because he couldn't find work on Kos. Kerry stayed on Kos and rented an apartment very close to where she worked. It was approximately about a mile away from where her parents lived in their caravan, so they were very close together. Ben remained with his mother Kerry on the island and was cared for by his grandparents while Kerry was at work. Eddie and Stephen found work on construction sites on the island, helping to renovate houses and do building work, as there was developmental works going on certain places in Heracles. Eddie and Stephen were working on a particular farmhouse when, on the 24th of July in 1991, after Kerry had gone to work, Ben was left in the care of Christine, his grandmother. He was around 21 months old at this time. Christine, Danny and Ben and their dog, who was also called Ben, but we'll just call him the dog to avoid confusion. They were at the caravan on this day, and Christine decided to visit her husband at a farmhouse that he and Stephen were renovating. So she paid them a surprise visit. She took Ben in his pushchair. He had two dinky toy cars with him, and he was wearing a greeny blue shorts, a white t-shirt, and socks and sandals. Christine cannot be certain of the exact time of this, but it was around 11:30, just before 12 o'clock. This was not a planned visit, this was not an appointment, this was not something that she said she'd do. They just went for a stroll. They took a leisurely stroll up the road from the caravan to the farmhouse. It was a very, very short distance. The farmhouse was in a very remote location at the top of a dirt track, with construction being carried out behind it in the surrounding areas. Now, that particular dirt track is a road, a fully paved road, but at the time it was little more than a dirt track. Diggers were turning over the land, concrete was being poured, there was a lot of developmental work going on in this area. As Christine, Danny and Ben and the dog approached the house, she took Ben out of the pushchair, and out on the porch, Ben began to play with his two toy cars. Christine says she didn't even know if she went in first of all, but at some point they had lunch, a Greek lunch, which was provided by the people who actually owned the farmhouse. And shortly after, Ben had wet himself, so Christine took Ben's blue shorts off him and he was just playing in his t-shirt and sandals. She didn't have a nappy, she didn't have a change of clothes, so she hung the blue shorts on a branch to dry. Not long after this, Stephen said that he wanted to go buy some beer and chips, so he went off on his moped. And it wasn't long after this that Christine noticed that Ben was rather quiet. She looked outside, but she couldn't see him. She and Eddie searched around the house calling for him, but he wasn't anywhere to be seen. He didn't respond when they called out to him. The road and the path to the porch of the farmhouse, it wasn't smooth. It was rocky and gravelly. It would not be easy for him to navigate. So Christine thought, logically, that there was only so far that Ben could go. She walked down the gravelly road, calling him, looking around, and she got to a point where she felt that Ben wouldn't have gone that far in such a short space of time. So Christine and Eddie came to the conclusion, which they said was the most logical, that Stephen had taken Ben with him on his moped as he went off. So they didn't question it. Ben had actually expressed that he wanted to go with his uncle Stephen. Apparently he loved going on bike rides with his uncle and his dad. The Needhams returned to the farmhouse and noticed that Ben's shorts had disappeared from the tree and they weren't anywhere in the vicinity. Assuming that Ben was with Stephen, the Needhams didn't raise the alarm until 7:30 that night. Eddie found out when he went to Kerry's flat because the family would go to Kerry's flat to have showers. They didn't have a shower at the caravan, and Stephen didn't know where Ben was. Eddie called the police, and it wasn't until 10 p.m. that day that she found out what had happened to her son. Kerry was escorted to the farmhouse by police to look around, and she, like most people, didn't think he'd be far. There wasn't many places he could have gone on his own. Eddie went to the main port on the advice of the police. There had been several departures on the ferry since Ben went missing. He looked in cars as much as he could, given that he had no jurisdiction. So he and the family began to think that rather than Ben wandering off, he must have been abducted. An extensive search was conducted over the next 11 days by the Needhams, their friends, the Hellenic police, and even the Hellenic army. No trace of Ben was found. The Kos chief of police was quoted as saying, "We now believe we have searched every possible part of that area, and the boy is not there. It leaves us with a great mystery. We have no theories, we have no solutions." The police did think that Ben's father Simon had taken him, but Simon was in the UK and had been for 2 days when Ben went missing. But as standard procedure, the police did look at the family. Kerry was at work and had been for hours both before and after Ben went missing. The police then looked at Ben's grandparents, Eddie and Christine, and his uncle Stephen to see if they knew more than they were letting on. The grandparents stuck to their story that Ben was there 1 minute and then just simply vanished. The grandparents were in the company of the family that owned the farmhouse at the time. There were some reports of a white car with 3 passengers that was seen on the dirt track earlier that day, but this car has not been traced even to this day, nor the occupants. So several more theories emerged. Number 1. Ben wandered off and was then kidnapped by gypsies. This theory would have to include the fact that Ben's shorts had gone missing and his 2 dinky car toys had also gone missing. They had not been found either. If Ben had walked off, why would his shorts have also gone missing? Some suspect that the wind may have blown the shorts off. Ben had tried to chase them, only to wander into the path of someone that saw him and took him. Unfortunately, could have been a paedophile who did whatever and then killed him, or by gypsies or someone that took him to raise him as their own or even sell him. This was a blistering hot day. Ben had just his 2 dinky car toys to play with. Would a little boy be bothered about chasing his shorts even if they did blow off the branch? How far would they go? What is also important to remember, that the family dog, a corgi, did not bark. This dog barked to anyone it didn't know. If Ben walked away and met someone on the way, that would make sense for the dog not barking. Anyone who passed by the farmhouse would get barked at. The second theory, Ben was kidnapped from the porch of the home. From the outside, if you look at the farmhouse from what was then the dirt track, you would see there were windows and a door, but you wouldn't necessarily see inside of it, but you would be able to hear voices from people inside. A kidnapper would have to have taken a huge risk in going right up to the porch to kidnap Ben. unless the boy was lured away from the house by a person who didn't want to approach and get too close. This would also account for the dog not barking if this person kept a bit of a distance. But then why would someone attempt to kidnap him and remove his shorts? They wouldn't bother. They wouldn't even bother with those 2-car toys. Ben may have been able to keep hold of them, but they wouldn't bother with the shorts, would they? If they were going to get hold of Ben and his shorts, they would have had to have gone right up to and past the windows and the doors to get to the branch where the shorts were. Unless, of course, the shorts had fallen down or been blown away, but even then, they probably wouldn't have gone far. This is unless, another thing, he had already been redressed in his shorts by someone who didn't tell Christine or Eddie that they'd done it, that they just put them back on him. Number 3, Stephen took Ben on his bike only for an accident to have occurred in which Ben died and Stephen buried Ben. In the documentary Somebody Knows, featured on ITV, Stephen Needham described how the police accused him of taking Ben with him on the bike, Stephen having an accident, and then burying Ben to cover it up. Taking a child on a bike is common in Kos. It's not something you do in the UK, but it's something that is done quite a lot on Kos. Stephen's bike showed signs of some damage, just some scuff damage. The police said that that was proof that an accident had occurred. Stephen stated that this was from an earlier knock when he was avoiding people. In this documentary, there seems to be a contradiction between what Stephen says and what Eddie says about the bike and taking Ben on bike rides. Stephen said that whilst Ben used to sit on the bike, he never took Ben on the roads with him. He then said that Simon, Ben's father, he did used to take him out on the bike. But Eddie said in the same documentary that Ben used to stand on the fairing for rides with both Simon and Stephen. The journalist then asked the following question to Eddie. So Steve used to take him around the island? Eddie replied saying, Stephen, yeah, his dad, Simon, used to take him on the bike. This has been viewed as a major contradiction, but if we really look at this, Stephen said he did not take Ben on the roads. The roads around where they lived and the farmhouse were dirt tracks and they weren't roads. The journalist asked Eddie an ambiguous question, so Steve used to take him around the island. Stephen may have taken Ben around the island, but not necessarily on the roads. However, because the Needhams assumed that Stephen had taken Ben on the bike, they didn't question it. So it's possible that there is a major contradiction here and that Stephen did used to take Ben out on the roads, because that's what the Needhams assumed. It was just the most reasonable explanation, they said, for Stephen leaving just before they noticed Ben had gone quiet, so they assumed Stephen was with Ben. Therefore, we can assume that Stephen used to take Ben out on the bike frequently. The Needhams also said, though, that Stephen would never have taken Ben without telling them. So why on earth didn't they question that? Why didn't they say, well, Stephen didn't say he was taking him, so they shouldn't have assumed that? But hindsight is a wonderful thing. It is strange, though, that they didn't go to Kerry's flat sooner to see if Ben was with Stephen, because Stephen wouldn't have had any supplies with him to look after Ben. But we may never know the answers to that. Number 4. Ben wandered off and was killed by a digger in a nearby field. Behind the farmhouse there was some construction work going on, which involved the ground being dug up so that there could be room there for more houses to be built. So rubble was being dug up and then moved into a pile, and so on and so forth. What if Ben had walked into that field, which was just behind the farmhouse, and was accidentally killed by a digger and buried under concrete, or was buried under a rubble pile? This would account for him and his cars not being found. But again, what about his shorts? Maybe again, the shorts are blown off the tree. Ben had gone after him, still holding his cars. He was then killed by the digger. He could have been redressed in those shorts. Somebody could have taken them off the tree and just not said where they'd gone. We may never know what happened to those shorts. Christine Needham said she didn't give much thought to the fact that the cars or the shorts had gone missing, had never been found. It was not something she specifically focused on. They may have been removed later on, but the fact that they've never been found and nobody in the family or living in the farmhouse knows what happened to them, we can only assume that they went with Ben. The first of the 2 theories of Ben being snatched either by gypsies or a childless couple, either at the farmhouse or further down the line, is one of the most popular popular theories, as there is a large population of gypsies in Kos. The documentary describes Kos gypsies as the following. For the most part, they are poor, illiterate, and nomadic, rarely staying in one place for more than a few months. They live on the edge, cheap labour, cleaning houses, and picking crops, buying and selling anything, including, at times, their own children. The Needhams have tried for years to speak to and look into the gypsy camps all around Greece and also in nearby Turkey, because Kos is actually physically closer to Turkey than it is to mainland Greece. The Needhams and the police have followed up leads on gypsy families that have blonde-haired children, particularly if someone has blonde hair but they are with darker skinned families or a Western looking person with them. There have been many sightings which unfortunately turned out not to be Ben. The documentary goes on to say that the Needhams live in hope for this because of the following. There is a market in children in Greece. It's an open secret here. Doctors sell unwanted babies from hospitals, and some gypsies sell their children. However, there have been no reports in or around any gypsy camps or anyone affiliated with them that any gypsy family had stolen a Western child and sold them or raised them. Eddie did report though, when he was in Athens, he showed a reward poster to someone, and the man called to a woman in his tent who was heavily pregnant. The man said to Eddie that for the same amount of the reward money, he could have this baby when it was born. Yet what is also interesting that further down the road, not far from where the farmhouse was, is another house next to the lane, and a woman who lived there was sitting on her terrace that day facing the lane. She saw Stephen leave on his bike. She didn't say that there was a child with him, but she may not have been able to see if there was because her view would have been obscured. But she didn't see anyone else enter or leave that lane. That lane was the only way out unless people are crossing rough terrain. A reward of increasing money has been offered for Ben's safe return, but any leads that the Needhams have received have gone cold. Ben has never been found, despite numerous sightings and reports from witnesses that they know or have seen children that resemble Ben. Many of these have been followed up personally by Eddie and Christine, who have been out to Kos numerous times, but DNA testing on people that have claimed to be Ben have confirmed that they are not. As recently as just a few weeks ago, a Danish man came forward saying that he thought he was Ben. But unfortunately, in the last few weeks, DNA testing has proved that he is not Ben. The theory that Stephen Needham took Ben on a bike ride has been explored in greater detail. Stephen was put under hypnosis in the documentary Somebody Knows. This was overseen by a forensic psychologist, lawyers, and other specialists. It was also at the request of the Needham family, given that Stephen's memory of that day in question, as stated by the narrator in the documentary, is poor. Memories that our brains have recovered either due to the passage of time or trauma can be recovered through hypnosis, but we also can bring to mind false memories implanted due to suggestion or people telling us this is what happened, and then you get an image in your head as you're being told that, and then it becomes a false memory. Under hypnosis, Stephen reported seeing the concrete mixer and tractor, which were indeed there on the day. He recalled what the place looked like and that he had gone off on his bike as he was, quote, bored and wanted to buy beer and chips. He had images of a supposed accident in which Ben had, quote, gone under the back wheel of his bike. But it wouldn't have been possible because Ben would have been in front of him on the fairing. There's no way he could have gone under the back wheel. Stephen also had an image of him using a shovel to bury Ben on the side of the lane, but he had no access to a shovel. Stephen Needham says that these were just images planted by the police because under hypnosis, he was recalling the images that he had brought up while he was being interrogated by the police. They were very specific to the police's accusations. There is no evidence at all that Stephen had anything to do with Ben's disappearance, nor was there any evidence of a fatal accident. You'd think that the damage to the bike would be more substantial. You'd think that Stephen himself would have been injured. You'd think he'd be covered in blood and dirt and there'd be blood on the dirt track or something. Even in a rural area, surely a fatal accident would have been witnessed. There would have been a shallow grave discovered, because I don't think even one person to bury a little boy's body would have buried them so deep that they wouldn't be discovered as having recently disturbed earth anywhere. South Yorkshire police have since become involved. They started to explore the fourth theory, that Ben was killed in an accident on the site near the farmhouse. The rubble in the area was searched by both the British and the Greek police, but nothing was found. No human bones, nor any of Ben's clothing or his cars, nothing whatsoever. 4 years later, in 2016, someone who previously hadn't said anything came forward. He reported that a friend of his called Konstantinos Barkas, who was also known as Dino, was the digger in the field behind the farmhouse, and he was there the day that Ben disappeared. Dino had reportedly told his friend that the theory of Ben dying in an accident on the day the construction site was being turned over and he was using the digger was true, and that Dino himself had buried him. Dino had died the year before, so he couldn't be interviewed, and it was unclear if this friend is telling the truth or not because he only came forward after Dino passed away. However, this informant did point out to the police the area in which Dino was working, which was different to the area searched in 2012. So in 2016, South Yorkshire Police and the Greek police searched the area described by this informant, and they turned up hundreds of animal bones. They all were confirmed to be animal bones. That was a blow to the family. They were hoping to find some of Ben's remains, but there were some items of interest found. There was a piece of leather found which was thought to be a portion of Ben's sandal, but the most important thing that was found, a yellow dinky toy car dating to 1991. Children's toys can be found anywhere, having been deposited at any given time, but given that Ben had 2 dinky toy cars on him the day he went missing, they were from 1991, and specifically a dinky toy car turns up in a field that's been excavated because it was thought that that's where he died. It doesn't strike me as a coincidence. The family said at first that they did believe this item to have been Ben's, but they've since said that they're not 100% sure. Detective Inspector John Cousins said, "It is my professional belief that Ben Needham died as a result of an accident near the farmhouse in Heracles where he was last seen playing. The recovery of this item and its location further adds to my belief that material was removed from the farmhouse on or shortly after the day that Ben disappeared." Kerry Needham said in an interview with Loose Women that they believe it was Ben's body that was removed from the area, so either deliberately by somebody or when they were moving the rubble from the pile that was there to somewhere they were going to dump the rubble, that Ben's body went with it. In 2016, blood found on the toy car was analysed, and in November 2018, the blood was found to not be Ben's. So maybe this toy car isn't Ben's. But just because blood found on it isn't Ben's doesn't mean that it didn't belong to Ben. Somebody else's blood may have got onto it. The ordeal continues for the family. Some believe there to be a cover-up due to the inconsistencies in the story. The shorts going missing, that's another sticking point. And the car's not been found until, presumably, if this yellow dinky toy car is Ben's. Why have they not been found if that one isn't? Maybe the shorts were there, just nobody clocked them, and somebody had removed them, they've just never been located. Or Ben had been dressed in his shorts and was wearing them when he went missing. The dog not barking is another point. Apparently, if anyone walked by the farmhouse, the dog would bark. They didn't even need to walk up to the farmhouse porch. I do hope that the family does receive answers one day, because it is a very strange story. It is not straightforward, and there are many theories, but the family still hold on to hope that Ben may well still be alive. Kerry Needham was on Loose Women in September 2018, and she publicly said she did not blame her mother for her son having gone missing. She went on to say that she hopes that her son is still alive and considers her son still a missing person until he is found, either living or deceased. She says she hasn't been able to grieve because they haven't found Ben's remains or any indication of remains, but she says she does believe what the detective inspector said about Ben dying the day that he was missing and the body later being removed. If you do have any information about the disappearance of Ben Needham, I implore you, I beg you to come forward for the sake of Ben's family and the need to put an end to all of this. If you know where Ben's body is, if he is indeed dead, or if you think you know Ben, or if you are Ben, please email helpfindbenneedham@gmail.com. More information is available on the Facebook page Help Find Ben Needham. All links and information is in the description below. In the last few days of researching this, I found out that Kerry Needham has only recently moved to Turkey. She wants to be near Kos, but she says she doesn't want to be on the island of Kos because it makes her feel, as she says, physically sick. And although it hurt her to leave the UK, her mum, her dad, her daughter, because she had a daughter a few years after Ben went missing, Leanna, and 2 grandchildren, Leanna is now a mother, It's what she has to do. She's never going to give up looking for her son until he is found or she receives confirmation as to what happened to him on that day if he did indeed die. Thank you very much for listening to this, little berries. I really would love to hear your thoughts. If you are from Kos and you are watching this, please see if you can help in any way that you can. I know that it may be limiting as to how much you can, but anything that you can do, talking to people and go to the authorities, please help put this matter to bed. I really wish you all the best, little berries. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.